Welcome to Culture Vultures. I'm Sandy Frye, your host. Our creative director is Nancy Cole, and this program looks at arts and culture all around Tampa Bay. Our guest today is Clint Randles, Assistant Professor of Music Education at the University of South Florida. Clint teaches progressive music education methods and also performance chamber ensemble at the underground level. But that's not all. He also has a class for students with special needs in community outreach, and he has begun teaching iPad music to young adults as well. We'll get into that a little later. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted and absolutely floored by the fact that you can send a message and send a musical work of your own choosing, you know. And that's not all. He also creates not just music, but he does papers that are delivered, has been delivered to Egypt, United States, England, where else? Finland, China. I mean,
it's been
all
fun.
over. You must be going 24/7, because I haven't mentioned that he also writes books and contributes articles and chapters to musical journals and music education. That is a big, heaping amount of work you do. You're in and out, you're on the go. You and James Bass, I think, must pass each other in the night, because
I rarely see James Bass.
That's right, that's why, and he probably doesn't see you either. You just came from England.
Yes, a few weeks ago.
What were you doing?
It was the International Psychology of Music Ed Conference,
right,
at the Institute of Education in London.
Yeah.
And it was a meeting place for music educators from around the world to talk about music psychology and technology. This particular conference.
Let me ask you that. I used to work at USF, and I don't remember there was a course that dealt with the psychology of music.
Yes, it's a class that I've taught here at USF
right,
at the doctoral level. And there's so many things that intersect psychology. Of course, our lives and worlds and the way that we think and act all intersect with psychology, psychological processes, cognitive, even at the sociological level, there's psychology.
Right.
So, yeah, so the conference was a place to talk about psychology of music with a technology perspective. So I was able to share some of the things that we've done with our iPad ensemble and our work with special needs students, and it was very well received.
Students with special needs, what are they particularly?
Well, we're really fortunate here at USF to house the Florida branch of VSA, and VSA is the International Organization for Students with Disabilities and the Arts. It's housed at the Kennedy Center in DC, so it is an international organization, and we gave an iPad performance a year ago, and one of the chief organizational officers came to our concert, and she's a wonderful person, and she decided not to send me an email or call me on the phone, but she came to my office and knocked on my door, and had a captive audience, and she said, you need to do something for our students, the students that we service, which is all manner of autism, Down syndrome, Tourette's. We have students whose hemispheres don't communicate. We have nonverbal students, and it's been a joy. Students with who've been in traumatic injuries.
Right. Well, that's a whole range of things that you have to kind of particularly suit your teaching to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very different. I was a K-12 music teacher for 9 years, right, and so I taught band and general music, and we would have special needs students, maybe 1 or 2 in a class of 32, but from five students who have severe special needs, it's very different. It's a lot of work, and you're constantly moving.
Right. When you said when you were in England, you also said that music is simply taught as a subject from K through graduation, and they are expected to do either a composition or perform in some way.
Yeah, I've always been enticed by the English system
Yeah.
because as I studied music ed as a graduate student, I learned that since the 70s they've had a strong emphasis on musical composition as a component of not only their music programs but their education program.
Sure, and technology has really made it much easier to do that, hasn't it?
It depends on who you talk to. They actually are quite jealous of our technology, the way that we use technology in our classrooms. If you go there, I mean, they have it, but a lot of times it's not as accessible. It's not as widespread as it is here.
Right.
Buildings are 150 years old and
Yes,
200 years old.
Right.
It's nothing
Nice
like
to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you had told me that you read a statistic that kids from, say, I don't know, 12 to maybe 18 or 19 spend maybe 8 hours, excuse me, not 8 years, listening to music. Do you think that's probably a pretty good target?
Yeah, a lot of our research has pointed to that. There's been studies done in England and the United States, and the data are pretty similar, 8 hours on average per student per day. Wow. It's amazing. You think eight hours, that's a lot of time.
Sure.
So clearly, humanity, and especially that adolescent age, are really engaged with music. They love music. It's a large part of their lives. So the missionary music educators in the country and around the world see that as an indicator that music could be a much bigger part of our school experience.
Let's get to the iPad then. Now, how did it first come to your attention?
Well, really, I have to give credit to my colleague David Williams, who he's an outside-the-box kind of thinker and a visionary, and really one of the main reasons why I'm here at USF. Yeah. He sought me out.
Oh, how nice!
And
how
I'm
flattering.
Here. Yeah, I'm here, and I'm glad to be here. So, David Williams, when the iPad came out in 2010, said, "This is great. I think that I'm going to write a grant to get some iPads, and we should start a band." And so we did, and the first iteration, we're sort of like the Beach Boys, you know, like some of us are still alive, you know, but that first iteration, we had 3 composition faculty and the 2 of us, 2 music ed faculty, and we did the Florida State Conference here in Tampa, the music ed conference, and then we just kept going. We kept playing. As soon as word spread that we had an iPad band, you know, we were playing for music teachers in Pinellas County, and you know, we were going to doing sort of road shows, and we would go around Florida and basically this region, high schools and all of that. And we sort of branched out. We've gotten invitations now from the Music Educators National Conference that was held in Texas. We were in San Antonio, and then great things are happening all the time. So we had a concert 4 weeks ago, and the local NBC station picked it up, and it was syndicated and played all over the country. My friend in Chicago was working out at the gym and had to call me and say, "I just saw you on TV."
Oh, how wonderful.
Here in Chicago. So.
That's great. And you did teach a course last summer to just kids and maybe adults too. How many students did you have, and how did that work out?
Really well, yeah. I suppose the work with special needs students, I think the main point and what I'll take from all of this work in say 5 to 10 years is that most people can see the utility of having an instrument that's custom made for someone who can't play music any other way. For example, in the School of Music, you know, we tend to hold to our cherished beliefs about the importance of the things that we do. And if, say, I was the trombone professor, or if I was the cello professor, I would cherish and preach that trombone and cello is the way to go and only the way to, you know what I mean? We can't think about these other ways because this is really what's valuable. Of course, if my livelihood depended on it, I would be adamant about that. But even with my colleagues that are applied lesson faculty, applied instrument faculty, they can see the utility of, say, for example, I'll give you a beautiful story. One of my students was injured in a car accident 5 years ago, And she was an amazing flute player before the accident. She was all state, so she was one of the best high school flute players in Florida. And the car accident ended that playing for her. It left her paralyzed from the waist down, and she could only use one arm. And so fast forward to about 2 months ago, and she came into my VSA iPad class, you know, and her mom came with her. Her mom's a beautiful person, loves music, and is very interested, of course, in her child's well-being. And so I dialed up, you know, a flute on this, on the iPad. And so, you know, in the flute sound, let's see if we can make this happen here. Flute sound's absolutely beautiful.
Does it?
So it's, you know, so she played this for the first time. And I wish I could have had that, bottled up that moment in time, because it really was, it was one of those teaching moments that I don't know that I'll ever have it again like that, because it was pure joy on her face, on her mom's face, that this thing that she loved was now going to be a part of her life again. And she was able to solo. We had a concert, our last concert 4 weeks ago, and she played a G blues on the flute. She improvised with the flute with our band, and some of the other students from VSA. So
that's great.
Yeah, back to the question, I think it empowers, certainly it empowers special needs students, you know, those who they love music, they just want to be near it. You know, some of our Down syndrome kids, they have a guitar and they have a piano in their house just because they want to be around music. You know, they have a flute or an accordion. And physically, it's not going to happen for that instrument right now, and being able to play proficiently, but they just love it. They want to be around music. So with the iPad, it's sort of a bridge to that world that they've always wanted. They've always wanted to be able to do this, and now, you know, touch this, and it sounds like a flute, and it sounds good right now. And so you don't have to, well, take out the case, let's put your fingers here, let's form it this way, and oh, by the way, you got to make your embouchure just like this, and then they play and it sounds terrible for months, you know. So there is value to that, of course, but I think to those colleagues, they can see the utility in that, you know, having technology bring people to music is good.
Oh, sure. Is a knowledge of music, knowing how to read music, is that a given, or do you start even with people who have never had any musical instruction?
Well, certainly it can be, and it just depends on what your end goal is. You know, if your life goal has been to play in a professional orchestra, then of course you start with reading, and that's a strong component of what you value when you're learning music that way. So it just depends on what the end is.
Right.
You know, for a lot of these students, they just want to hear, they want to play around with sound. They want to hear what it sounds like when they play an electric guitar or a tenor saxophone with 2 thumbs. You know, they want to play with over a chord progression in a band with a violin. They've always wanted to do that. So here, let me set this up, and you can do that.
Okay.
So,
all right.
But I think ultimately, you know, I think down the road I'm going to write a book about the notion that, you know,
there has to be a set way to do this.
Well, who isn't a special learner?
Right.
Who doesn't deserve to have a customizable music education where you can tailor the things that we do, the things that are taught to your own individual interests and needs? I think that in 2014 we can do that. You know, certainly we have the means to do that.
Yeah, it really wouldn't have been possible to this extent 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what's going to lie in the future, really, technologically. When you are teaching methods of music education to your either your undergraduates or your advanced graduates, what do you stress?
Well, as you can imagine, the beginning of those conversations are all about philosophically unpacking what we believe about music. What do we really value? What do we think music is? And what do you think music education is? And a lot of our students come in wanting to be that model of music education that got them there. And the system is stacked for being able to read notation and play Western classical art music on an instrument that we have in our ensembles. If you are an incredible mandolin player, if you're an incredible banjo player, we won't let you in our school.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Well, if you can't play in a band or an orchestra, there's no studio professor, and there's no place for you in our school. We're working on that. It's one thing that we've thought a lot about.
I hope there are a lot of people like you.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
You'll change the way music is actually accepted. Music began with as man began. I mean, it's been that way, and in various nations and cultures, it's different, but it's meaningful to them. And why shouldn't it be? Really?
Yeah.
I think it's great.
So with the teachers, that's a great question.
Yeah.
But they, over time, we begin to, talk about what music can be. That music is this great, big, beautiful thing that we love all around the world, as you said. And if music is this, and this is the picture that we've painted of, institutional music is this, and here are standard instrumentation, and here's a standard way of operating, with the understanding that most cultures around the world don't read any sort of notation.
Right.
Dance and music is the same word in most cultures.
Oh, how interesting.
It's the same word.
Yes.
But have you ever seen any dancing at the Florida Orchestra?
No. That's true.
And I love the Florida Orchestra, but there's no dancing there.
No, there is no dancing there. Well, tell us a little bit more about the iPad, and maybe you'll honor us with.
Absolutely. So this app is called Thumb Jam, and it's set up like a scale. And the red, everywhere where you see red is the tonic note, and then you've got the blue is the dominant, and green is the subdominant. So this is a Rhodes organ playing the blues. And so you've got all kinds of instruments in there. They sound great. It's really well sampled app that we use quite a lot. We've got vibrato on the cello. And we had some students today in a performance who used the cello very effectively. Then you have other apps that look like instruments that you've seen. So this is actually the neck of a guitar. And it goes 8 frets, and so you can play scales. And you've got this option, which is really great for our special needs students. It's sort of like an auto harp, if you've ever remembered playing one of those. So you push the letter and it plays the chord. So a C, or an A, or an F. It gives you the option to actually play an arpeggiation of the chords, like. And so there are all kinds of options there. You can change the chords around. Within the same app, GarageBand, you can move over to a piano, and you can play things like this. You can play a little bit of blues or jazz. I won't play that, but I can play a little bit of honky tonk with 2 hands. The sustain pedal is a little different than a piano if you're a keyboardist. Of course, you've got the bass. I think I have to lay it down to play this one. So
Wow.
they're bass strings. You can bend them. And unlike a bass, you can actually bend the open note, which would not be possible. You've got chord options on that as well, so you can play arpeggiations of the chords. So that's a nice one. You can actually play instruments through it, which is something that we do sometimes. And we have one special needs student who loves the drums. And anytime that we can insert more drums, you've heard more cowbell, she'll put it in there. It's great. A little bit of sound on the table, yeah. But so those are a few of the things that you can do with just GarageBand app. This is a very strange one, and it's called Cosmovox. And there are parts of this app that I love, and the sounds that I'm not so fond of. There's kind of sci-fi, kind of space age. But here's this. You can see what you can do, and my Down syndrome kids love this. There are all the notes of the scale in there. You can get various intensities by bending, shaking. You can change the fundamental. So you have all the notes of the scale. So this tilt function, I think, is great. It's brilliant. But the sounds, we just need better sounds with it. So there's an app developer that I'm working with through a nonprofit organization called Little Kids Rock.
Oh, well, that sounds interesting in itself.
Yes, absolutely. And I could tell you the history of that a little bit in our relationship, USF's relationship to Little Kids Rock. It's a nationwide initiative, and they're starting in New York, LA, and Tampa.
No kidding.
Hillsborough County, and USF, is right in the middle of Hillsborough County, and we're one of the only universities nationwide that are preparing teachers to go out and do new interesting pedagogies and new technologies and embrace
that's terrific.
new ways of being musical.
And how did you hear about USF? You're a Michigan person?
Yeah, I first came to USF as a doctoral student. I presented at the Suncoast Music Ed Research Symposium here, and the Marshall Center had just been opened. What a beautiful facility. I just thought the faculty here was top-notch. I followed a professor from MIT, an associate professor there, and she had some sort of algorithm for how sound was made, and she demonstrated this very high-tech keyboard and computer interface. And I'm a PhD student, and I'm sitting there thinking, how on earth do I follow this? But I did, and it went well, and I think made an impression, and they actually the next year there was a job opening, and they invited me to apply. So.
Oh, how wonderful. What do you think will happen in the next 10 years if you had your way of changing the whole sort of curriculum?
Well, I thought a lot about this when I was a music teacher, and I taught at a beautiful community in West Michigan, and I really felt like I connected with the community well and was able to make a difference there, and doing a lot of the things that I told you about that I'm preparing teachers to do here.
Right.
And I could easily see myself having retired from there and had a nice, happy life in this Norman Rockwell sort of little town. But I had this call, to try to make a difference on a bigger scale. So now I teach 32 undergraduates, and they'll graduate in 3 years, and they're all going to go out and get their own little beautiful Norman Rockwell little community. So. I could easily see over, a decade or so, all of them going out and doing wonderful things. I've started to see that already. But, I think in a perfect world, I would say that we do our 20% that we've always done really well in music ed. We need to prepare our teachers to do that, to be able to go out and conduct bands and orchestras and choirs. And continue those traditions that are valuable to everyone in my building. That's a
wonderful aim, and knowing you, I'm sure that you're going to accomplish it. It's really terrific. Thanks for being with us. It was really, it's marvelous. It's for me, who is not a tech person, I think it's something like magic. Thanks again for showing me this magic in music, and be with us again.